Hey scientists, Mrs. Melvin here with the beginning of our class science project. Okay, so you should have already watched the vocabulary video that I posted with our vocabulary words for this unit. Okay, we are focused on what science is, and we know now that science is the study of the natural world. Okay, and in my vocabulary video, I had a little example of what a question or a problem might be for me that I could solve using the scientific method. And I told you guys that I have a 2-year-old daughter named Sophia, and when I put her in the bath for a bubble bath, the bubbles are gone before she even gets started. And then I'm running around trying to make her happy again. No good. So I want to know which bubble bath is going to make bubbles that last the longest. Okay, that's my question. And that's the beginning of our science experiment. Okay, my question for this science experiment is, which bubble bath makes the longest lasting bubbles? Now, I'm going to make a prediction. Okay. I'm going to put what I think my answer to the question is going to be. And that's my hypothesis. I wrote that in green, okay? My hypothesis is I predict that the frozen bubble bath will have the longest lasting bubbles. That's what I think is going to happen. And it might be because I like frozen, but I don't know. We're going to find out, okay? Now it's time to design an experiment to test this. I want to know if I'm right. It's not good enough for me to just say that I think that's what's going to happen. I need to prove it with science. So I have all kinds of materials here for us to use for our science experiment. And just so that if anyone wanted to go behind me and do this again and test my experiment, I made a list of all my materials. So for this experiment, we're going to use measuring cups, a stopwatch, clear plastic containers, 3 different kinds of bubble bath, and water. That's all we need, and a little bit of time and patience. So now we have our question, we have our hypothesis, we have our materials, and I came up with a few different steps for this experiment. So the first thing that we're going to do is label our containers. I have 3 different containers for our 3 different brands of bubble bath. We have Paw Patrol bubble bath. We have Kids Foaming Watermelon bubble bath. And we have the Frozen Frosted Berry Scent bubble bath, tear-free. So I am going to put bubble bath in each of these 3 containers, okay? But what would happen if I did that and then I forgot which bubble bath I had put in all of the different containers? That would be so frustrating. I would have to start all over. So to make sure that doesn't happen, I have my handy dandy sticky notes. And I'm just going to go ahead and write frozen on one sticky note, and I'm just going to put it right on the front like that so that I know that the frozen bubble bath is in that container. And then I'm going to say Paw Patrol, and I'm going to take this sticky note and I'm going to put it right there on the front of my container so that I know the Paw Patrol bubble bath is in this one. And then finally, we have our, I'm just going to put watermelon. Well, it doesn't quite fit on my sticky note, but I know what that means, and that's all that matters. And I'm going to plop that bad boy on there, and I've got my labeled containers. Now there will be no confusion. Okay. So what's next? Well, I need to put the bubble bath in there, right? But what if I put different amounts of bubble bath in the containers, then it won't really be a good test, because what if it's just the different amounts of bubble bath that's making the bubbles last longer? So I need to make sure I put the same exact amount of bubble bath in all of my containers. And that's where my measuring cup comes in. I'm going to put 150 milliliters of bubble bath in each container. Okay, so I'm going to take my Paw Patrol bubble bath, and I am going to fill my measuring cup all the way up to 150 milliliters. We are all about having, oh, that smells good. What? Doesn't tell me what it's supposed to smell like, but I like it. Ta-da, 150 milliliters. Now, boys and girls, when we are measuring things in measuring cups, like liquid like this, it's really important that we make sure it's on the table and that we get down at eye level like this to make sure we're reading the measuring cup right. And when I did that, I saw that I'm exactly at 150 milliliters, and I can go ahead and pour this into my Paw Patrol bucket. Now guys, there's a little bit stuck on the outside of the container, or on the inside of the container rather. So what would happen if I went ahead and just used my next bubble bath in this same container? Well, it would get contaminated. Then I wouldn't really know which bubble bath produced the bubbles that last the longest, because I'll have it mixed with the Paw Patrol bubble bath, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna go rinse this out, and I'll be right back. All right, my measuring cup is nice and rinsed out and ready to measure out our watermelon scented bubble bath. Now I have to make sure that I do 150 milliliters again this time, because if I don't, there goes my experiment. Ooh, it does smell like watermelon. It smells like a watermelon Jolly Rancher. Okay, here I go. I am pouring this one out, and I am at 150 milliliters. But remember, I'm gonna get down at eye level and check to make sure. Yep, 150. And now I'm gonna pour this into our watermelon scented container. Now, don't forget, if we pour our frozen bubble bath in here right now, it's contaminated. So I have to go rinse this out again. And I know it's a little frustrating, but I don't wanna have to do this whole process again. I wanna make sure that my scientific method is very precise. Alrighty, I am ready to measure out my third bubble bath, and it's our frozen berry scented bubble bath. Now don't forget, this is the one that I predicted was gonna have bubbles that last the longest. And I am measuring out 150 milliliters of bubble bath. And I'm gonna get down at eye level to make sure that it's correct. It is. And in it goes to our frozen bubble bath container. Now, I don't have to rinse this container out right now because we don't have any more to measure. So I'm just gonna set it to the side. Okay, now here's our Paw Patrol. We can make some observations now. We can say that the Paw Patrol bubble bath is pink, and it's very viscous. And viscous just means that it's thick and moves really slowly, like honey or molasses. Here is our watermelon bubble bath, and this one is kind of green colored, and it's not as viscous as the other one. It moves a little faster when I move it around the bottom of the container. And then we have our frozen bubble bath, which is kind of blue, and it's very viscous. It barely moves when I tilt the container back and forth. So there's the observations that we can make about our bubble bath. And remember, I used my senses for that. I looked and I saw with my eyes, and I'm smelling with my nose. And I could even stick my finger in there and feel it to see what it feels like too, but I don't want to get my fingers all slimy. Okay, we're doing pretty good so far. Now it's time to make some bubbles. So can I just get the garden hose and just come in here and fill them all up? No, I need to make sure that I put the same amount of water in each container. Because if I put a different amount of water in each one, how will I really know that it's the bubble bath that made the bubbles last the longest? What if it was the difference in the amount of water I put in? So I want to eliminate all of those other possibilities so that we know for sure which bubble bath makes the bubbles that last the longest. So this is when we get to measure again. I have a big bucket of water right here, and I have another measuring cup. Now this time, we're gonna put half a gallon of water in each of these containers, okay? So I'm gonna take my water, and very carefully, I'm probably gonna make a mess. I'm gonna measure out half a gallon of water. Now I'm probably gonna have to fill up my container again, but that's okay. I'm gonna get down at eye level and see that I have half a gallon of water. Now I'm gonna take this, and I have to think carefully here because when you make a bubble bath, the water comes out of the faucet, right? And it has to travel a little ways before it actually hits the bubble bath at the bottom, doesn't it? It's not right here. So if I think about a bathtub, I would say that it's probably pretty deep. So I'm gonna stand up when I do this so that when I pour the water, it's just like it would happen if it was in an actual bathtub. So I'm gonna pour it from all the way up here, and we're gonna start with our Paw Patrol bubble bath. And there is our Paw Patrol bubbles. Excellent. Next, I'm gonna measure out half a gallon of water again. I'm gonna get down at eye level to make sure it's half a gallon, which it is. Next up, watermelon scented bubbles. There we go. We have our watermelon bubbles. We're out half a gallon for our last container. And I'm gonna get down at eye level to make sure it's exactly at half a gallon. And here come our frozen bubbles. Okay, so we have successfully started our experiment. All three of our containers have the same amount of bubble bath. They have the same amount of water. And I have to just wait. Pop, 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 pop. Well, I guess I could make some more observations while I'm just looking at my bubbles. So if I look at the Paw Patrol bubbles, I see that the bubbles are not very big. It looks kind of fuzzy, like a sweater. But I can hear them popping. And then if I look at the watermelon scented, a couple of the bubbles are a little bit bigger and they're higher. And then if I look at the frozen bubbles, I can actually see some of the water. So the bubbles aren't covering the whole top of the water. So that's interesting. And then I'm gonna get down like this and I'm gonna look at how deep the bubbles are. So I'm gonna bring you with me to look at this. I'm not sure if you can tell or not, but at the top, there's a layer of bubbles. and then our colored water underneath. So I can look at how thick the bubbles are to help me decide which bubble bath made the most bubbles, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for if the bubbles are gonna last a long time. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna think about my daughter. So there's no kid in these tubs. These bubbles are just hanging out all by themselves. We need to do something to replicate my daughter being in the tub with the bubbles. Right, I am back with the tools that I'm going to use to pretend like they're Sophia. And we want to make sure that all the same things happen to each of our containers. Okay, we can't do one thing to one container and not do it to the other containers. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clear plastic cup and I'm going to scoop water up so that it's full and then pour it back out into the same container, just like she would in the tub with her cups. Okay, so I'm going to start down here with our Paw Patrol and I'm going to scoop and dump 5 times. I scooped all the way full and I dumped. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can make observations again. I have bubbles all over my hand and all over the outside of the container. Now, I'm going to take a stick and I'm going to pretend like this is Sophia and she is going back and forth in the tub, back and forth and back and forth. And I am going to do that for 30 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, that was 30 seconds. And I'm looking and it seems like there's actually more bubbles than there were before. The bubbles, I have a fresh cup and I'm gonna scoop 5 times because that's how many times I scooped this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, bubbles all over my cup and all over my hand. I'm gonna set that aside and I'm gonna get a fresh stick. This is a different one. And I'm gonna be Sophia for 30 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Just like last time, I'm going to make some observations and I can see that it actually looks like there's more bubbles than there were before. Now, I don't want to contaminate my last container with all of these bubbles on my hand. So I'm going to rinse it off so that I don't contaminate. I'm going to get a fresh cup and I'm going to scoop this one 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ooh, those are big ones. So I actually have huge bubbles there in my hand from this one. I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to bring this for you to see, hopefully. Oh. Oh, I don't want to tip it because then I wouldn't be doing the same thing to all of the containers, but there are some huge bubbles in here. Now I'm going to get a fresh stick and I'm going to be Sophia for 30 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So this time, Bubbles actually stuck to the stick too. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to rinse off my hands so I don't contaminate anything. Now, I have measured out my bubble bath. I've measured out my water. I did the same thing to all 3 containers. Now I'm going to just set them aside. And I'm going to come check on them every 30 minutes. And at every 30-minute mark, I'll make more observations about the bubbles. And I'll keep all of my observations in a very organized way, maybe in a table or a graph. And then once my bubbles are gone or my experiment is over, I can say which one lasted the longest. So I'm going to go do some other stuff and come check on these in 30 minutes.